They made you believe Lemuria never existed, but ancient myths and aligned oral histories around the world say otherwise. This is not a tale pulled from books, and certainly not from the internet. It's a memory retrieved from the Akashic records, a retrieval from source itself. This is story time. You've probably heard of Atlantis, the advanced civilization said to have fallen beneath the ocean after misusing its power. But before Atlantis, there was Lemuria, and its story changes everything. Lemuria was Earth's first major civilization, a society of early humans and interdimensional beings living together in harmony over 200,000 years ago. Unlike Atlantis, which was more technologically focused, Lemuria was organic, soft, and deeply connected to the Earth. Think of it as the heart, while Atlantis was the mind. And like any living heart, it needed life. Back then, Earth was home to early humans, more instinctual, more primal, but with the potential to evolve. They weren't alone. As humanity took its first steps, others arrived, interdimensional beings from distant star systems. These star beings worked directly with the Earth and with a group of early humans who were already sensitive to energy. Together they founded the first true civilization, Lemuria. Lemuria was a continent, not a single island, but a vast landmass stretching across what's now the Pacific Ocean, touching parts of Hawaii, Easter Island, New Zealand, parts of Asia, and the Western Americas. Lemuria wasn't built overnight. To understand how it began, you have to look at what Earth was like over 200,000 years ago. At the time, Earth was home to early hominids, a mix of species like Neanderthals, Denisovans, and early forms of Homo sapiens. They were tribal, instinctive, and deeply connected to the land. But they didn't have structured civilizations yet. No cities, no systems of knowledge, just a raw, primal connection to survival and to the Earth herself. And that's where something unique happened, because Earth, or Gaia, the planetary consciousness, is not just a ball of rock. She's a sentient being, a living soul. She watches, responds, and evolves, just like any other consciousness. And when Gaia sensed that early humans were reaching a point of readiness, she sent out a signal, a call across dimensions. It wasn't in words, it was vibrational. A frequency that said, "I am ready for the next phase." And that's what drew the interdimensionals here. They didn't come as conquerors. They came as responders, as guardians, as guides who had once gone through similar stages of evolution on their own worlds. These beings were from systems like the Pleiades, Sirius, and Andromeda. They had already learned to live in harmony with energy, consciousness, and planetary ecosystems. When they arrived, not in ships, but through portals, they chose not to reveal themselves right away. They first observed, watched how the early humans interacted with the Earth, how they communicated with animals, how they sensed energy. And slowly, through dreams, light encounters, and gentle appearances, they began to make contact. Surprisingly, the early humans didn't reject them. They didn't have religious frameworks or fear-based programming yet. To them, these visitors were simply part of nature, just another kind of being, like the wind or the stars or the glowing rocks they felt pulsing beneath their feet. Some were afraid at first, some ran, but many remembered. Something in them resonated, because some of these early humans already carried star DNA, remnants from earlier seeding experiments on Earth. Their bodies recognized the visitors before their minds could even understand. And that's how it began. Not with a landing, but with a merging. The visitors didn't take over. They blended in, and together with the humans, they began to build the foundation of something the Earth had never seen before. Once the interdimensionals and early humans began to merge, something extraordinary happened. They didn't form cities, They didn't create currency or kings. They formed a living society, built on resonance, trust, and natural roles. There were no written laws, no borders, no ownership. Everything was shared, because separation wasn't part of their consciousness yet. The earliest Lemurians lived in small communities spread across vast, fertile land. Each family had a different strength. Some were natural growers. Some were healers. Some understood sound, or water, or the sky. These gifts weren't assigned. They simply emerged and were honored. Lemurian society was guided by councils, not of rulers, but of elders and harmonic anchors. They weren't chosen by vote or birthright. They were recognized by presence, by the way the earth responded when they spoke. Communication was mostly telepathic. They didn't need words. Their thoughts, feelings, and images flowed freely. When they did use sound, it was sung or toned, not spoken. Time wasn't linear. They didn't use clocks. They followed cycles: moon, sun, ocean tides, animal migrations. The year didn't start in January. It started when the whales returned. Conflict was rare, but when it happened, it wasn't punished. It was harmonized. Disagreements were brought to the earth, literally. The parties would sit on the ground, hands touching soil or water, and speak their truth until balance returned. The earth absorbed the charge. This wasn't a utopia. It was organic alignment, not perfect, just profoundly present. And over time, the Lemurian frequency grew. Not through expansion, but through resonance. Other beings felt it. Other regions responded. And the land itself began to shift, activating crystals, water lines, and magnetic fields. The Lemurians didn't control the earth. They listened to her. And through that listening, they discovered something ancient and alive. The land wasn't random. It had currents, not of water, but of energy. Invisible rivers flowing beneath the surface, some straight, some curved. And where these lines met, the earth sang. Not metaphorically, but through sound, vibration, resonance. A language only the sensitive could hear. These were the ley lines, natural energy pathways that carry Gaia's frequency around the planet. The Lemurians didn't just map them, they lived by them. Communities were placed near convergence points where the energy was strongest. These weren't just power spots. They were living temples, places where communication with Gaia, with the stars, and with the self became effortless. And in these places, they didn't build towers or monuments. They placed crystals, large ones, small ones, not just quartz, but celestite, amethyst, selenite, obsidian. To Lemurians, crystals weren't accessories. They were beings. Each one held memory, tone, and purpose. They didn't program crystals like we do today. They collaborated with them, placed them in the soil to balance the land, held them during conflict to stabilize emotion, brought them to water to create resonance fields. If a child was ill, the elders wouldn't just treat the body. They'd listen to the energy field and call on the crystal ally that could bring coherence back to the system. And many today are starting to remember that your crystals aren't charged by the moon. They're activated by your presence, by your listening, by your willingness to collaborate. And this wasn't just spiritual, it was functional. These crystals worked like amplifiers, transceivers, and anchors within the planetary grid. When placed on ley line intersections, they stabilized frequencies, created portals, and sometimes even allowed communication with other worlds. You might be drawn to a crystal for no reason. You might feel a vibration in your hands when holding one. That's Lemuria speaking to you, through the grid, through the stone, through your own body. Lemuria wasn't just advanced because of energy or crystals. It was advanced because its people understood they weren't alone. Not in the galaxy, but in their own environment. To a Lemurian, everything was alive. The rivers, the wind, the mountains, even the stones had memory. And at the center of it all was Gaia. Not a myth, not a symbol, a real, sentient being, the consciousness of Earth itself. Gaia didn't speak with words. She spoke with resonance, through the pressure in the air, the movement of animals, the vibration beneath bare feet. Lemurians didn't worship her. They communed with her. She was a partner, a guide, a vast intelligence that pulsed under every tree and tide. This is something modern humans have forgotten. But the Lemurians knew. The Earth is alive, and she responds when we listen. In Lemuria, humans didn't dominate nature. They participated in it. Animals were equals. Many of them could communicate telepathically, especially the cetaceans, dolphins, and whales. These beings were not creatures. They were galactic ambassadors, anchoring frequencies into the ocean, helping maintain the emotional field of the planet. Elementals were also real, not fairy tales, but natural intelligences who lived in the unseen layers of Earth. You might call them fae, sylphs, undines, fire beings. They were guardians of water, trees, volcanic flows, clouds, seeds, and the Lemurians respected them deeply. They worked with these beings, never exploiting, always asking permission, always giving offerings. The guiding force of Lemuria was the divine feminine, not as a religion, as a way of life. The feminine wasn't limited to women. It was a frequency, receptivity, intuition, nurturing, circular thinking, creation that flows from the womb of the body and of the planet. The councils were often led by priestesses, seers, and womb keepers, not because of hierarchy, but because they were attuned to Gaia's cycles. And the masculine, it was honored too, as protection, structure, and focus. But the feminine was the pulse, the rhythm, the drum that all life moved to. But nothing stays still in an evolving universe. Earth's frequency began to shift. The planet was preparing for a new phase. More souls were incarnating, many with different missions, different energies. Not all of them resonated with Lemuria's slow, heart-led pace. That's why the interdimensionals felt the need to return, not to rebuild Lemuria. They needed something else, a society where they could test technology, control, energy mastery, logic, a school of power, not harmony. That's when they seeded Atlantis. Lemuria had no desire to stop them. It wasn't in their nature to compete. So they watched, as Atlantis formed far away, on different ground, with different rules. To truly understand Lemuria, you have to let go of everything you've been taught about how the world works. Because in Lemuria, everything was alive. Everything was conscious. Everything had a voice. The humans, the animals, the plants, the elements, they didn't just coexist, they communicated. The people didn't train animals. They listened to them. A hawk circling above wasn't just nature. It was a message. A dolphin wasn't just playful. It was a wisdom keeper. And the whales? They were known as the elders of the deep, beings who carried the earth's emotional codes in their songs. Some Lemurians were born with the ability to speak to whales, not through sound, but through resonance. And beyond the animals, there were the elementals. You may know them today as myths, fairies, gnomes, sylphs, mermaids, fire spirits. But in Lemuria, they were very real. These beings were not physical in the same way humans were. They lived in the subtle layers of Earth, between the dimensions, within the elements. There were sylphs, guardians of air, seen dancing in wind patterns and bird migrations, salamanders, not lizards, but flickers of consciousness within fire and lava, gnomes and dryads, spirits of the forest, protectors of seeds and stones, undines, water beings who could be seen at the edges of lakes and waterfalls, mer-beings, sentient oceanic beings who often taught the Lemurians how to sing the grids. These weren't worshipped. They were respected, honored, included in ceremony and rhythm. And though mostly unseen today, the elementals never left. They dwell in the subtle layers of Earth, realms just beyond ordinary sight, woven between dimensions, vibrating just above the density of the physical. There are thousands of stories across cultures and time. Not all of them could be coincidence. Maybe they were never myth, just misunderstood. Some people still see them. Children, seers, those whose hearts stay soft and open. Because perception isn't just about eyesight, it's about resonance. And on the new Earth, we'll remember how to feel them again, and when we do, they'll be waiting. And at the center of it all stood the priestesses. The priestesses weren't all women, but they carried the womb frequency, the creative pulse that allowed life to unfold without force. They led ceremonies with animals, sang with dolphins during solstice tides, worked with crystals and waters to balance emotion in the land. Their temples weren't made of stone. They were encoded clearings, hidden gardens, mountaintop wind sanctuaries. They didn't dominate the energy. They listened to it. And because of that, the earth responded. In Lemuria, there was no veil, no line between my body and the forest, no distinction between real and magical. It was all part of the same pulse, but even the most harmonious rhythms eventually shift. As Earth's frequency changed, and as Atlantis rose with a different energy, the balance began to ripple. Some Lemurians felt the pull of change, others simply felt the fading. And so, the decline began, quietly, gradually. Lemuria didn't fall in a single moment. There was no explosion, no war, no one came and destroyed it. It ended gradually, through a mix of natural earth changes and rising energetic incompatibility with Atlantis. Over time, volcanic activity increased. Tectonic shifts became more frequent. Islands began disappearing. Shorelines changed. Some believe this was Gaia herself adjusting to the new frequencies entering the planet, frequencies introduced by Atlantean tech and experimentation. But long before the land vanished, the Lemurians could feel it coming. They noticed that their bodies were getting weaker. Some became sick for the first time in generations. The land stopped responding to their rituals. Elementals began vanishing. The dolphins swam away. The connection was fading. So they acted, not with panic, but with deep preparation. They gathered, performed final ceremonies, and began leaving. Some migrated to other parts of the world, especially South America, Asia, and the Pacific Northwest. Some were lost in the floods. Others passed peacefully, choosing to die before the disruption fully reached their regions. And some, the most attuned, left the physical realm altogether, shifting to inner earth sanctuaries or returning to the stars. But before any of them left, they buried records, literal and energetic, crystals, memory-encoded stones, symbols etched in cave walls, and songs taught to whales, not to be worshipped later, but to be rediscovered when the earth was ready to remember. And we're remembering now, not as historians, but as returning echoes. We don't just carry Lemuria in our minds, we carry it in our bodies, our dreams, our longing for something we can't quite name. Lemuria never truly disappeared. It sank into the soul of the world, waiting to rise, not as land, but as a frequency. And that frequency is rising again. It pulses in the hearts of those who remember. It echoes through the earth's grid. It lives in our visions, our longings, and in the quiet knowing that something ancient is returning. We are not rebuilding the past. We are becoming the new earth. Lemuria was not the first memory. Before its songs were sung, before its priestesses stood in light, something ancient stirred the earth awake. A story seeded even earlier that shaped the first humans. The next scroll takes us even further back, to a time of fire, creation, and cosmic intervention. a time of beings who altered the human path forever. The Eden experiment, the Watchers, the suppression of the divine feminine, and the moment the veil was drawn and humanity slipped into the dream. If something in this story gave you chills, if your heart ached or your eyes filled for reasons you can't explain, it's because you're remembering. This isn't for entertainment. It's a key, a frequency, not to distract you, but to awaken you. If it spoke to you, like, subscribe, and share what stirred within you, your memories of Lemuria, your own remembrance. They might help someone else remember too.